Cabinet at City Hall. As usual, the agenda papers and public forum submissions are available on our website. Can I draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure, which is outlined on the agenda, is currently being displayed on the screen. The meeting is being webcast, so remind everyone to speak into the microphone to ensure you are clearly heard. Item 2, public forum, a reminder that, as usual, statements and questions will be taken at the time of the relevant agenda item. And during that discussion, I'll reply to questions and or ask the relevant cabinet member to respond at that time. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. We've one, and that's from Craig Cheney. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask any cabinet member to share if they have any interest to declare? No? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5, matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. None for this meeting. Agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. There is one report submitted by Resources Scrutiny Commission. Jeff Gollop is not here, and it seems Councillor Heather Mack isn't here either. So we'll take that report as read. Agenda item 7, Chair's business. So I'm going to take the opportunity to raise 3 issues. The first is in the aftermath of the fire at Twinnell House. We want to start by acknowledging the tragedy of the loss of Abdul Jabbar Oryakel's death, and certainly in the office and with the community, we've been talking about his wife and children in Afghanistan, and how they're going to be coping and what we can do, maybe able to do to support them. And we've reached out to the community to have that conversation. I know there's some efforts going on to send some support. And I'd like to take this forum to thank some key people in how they responded to the fire itself, but also to taking care of those people who then left the building in the aftermath. It was an incredible operation. So first off, to thank the residents for working so effectively with our emergency services and with those volunteers. And amongst the volunteers, I mentioned Andy Paget, Howard Wilkinson, Chris Bookman, Pete Burns, all from the faith communities who rallied around. We had members of the local church and the school, St. Nicholas, who opened their doors during the early hours. Margaret Uloa, Rachel James, Dr. Daniel Doyle. Fantastic support from the neighbourhood policing team at Trinity Road, and Avon Fire and Rescue also, especially Carl Venn. I also need to thank the council staff. Many of them went way beyond anything we could expect to put that emergency response in place, with the rest centres, caretaking, organising hotel rooms, food supplies, repair, work, medical care, and so much more. And particularly Donna Liggins on that front, who I know was really at the heart of things. And I just want to, on a much broader point, say thank you to those who have worked so hard on fire safety in Bristol, on our blocks, since Grenfell in 2017. Fire safety has always been a priority, but what we saw in that fire was a fire broke out on a top floor flat, did not spread. Our cladding did not combust. The fire was contained within the flat. The fire service had access to it. We didn't need a full evacuation in the end, but when people were evacuated, it was done in an orderly way that enabled the fire service to get access to the fire and extinguish it, and then our own teams going in and building the cleanup operation after. So thank you to all those involved, and it should give us confidence in the measures that are in place in our blocks of flats. I will share one of the key pieces of advice that the fire service and the safety officers were given, and it is: please do not leave electrical items charging overnight of any sort, from phones to scooters to e-bikes, and certainly don't leave them in bedrooms and hallways. And if you are in a home, think ahead of time about what your exit routes would be and make sure you keep them as clear, as is possible. But that message about not leaving things charging overnight is one that we absolutely want to get out to people right across Bristol. Also an update on our cost of living work as we prepare for the winter coming upon us. I mean, we felt the temperature change over the last week. I certainly have noticed that. We've put in a big effort since the spring to get ready for this time of year. I'm going to make the point, while government have had its own internal facing conversations and continue to have their internal discussions and seem to be committed to setting policy with no reference to the actual needs of the people in the country, and certainly with no reference to the way we in local government would describe to them the needs of the populations we are trying to navigate through the cost of living crisis over the winter period. That said, we've got on with it in Bristol anyway, and many other cities and local authorities have too. Over the coming weeks, our citywide network of welcoming spaces will be coming online. And this is going to be a mix of community centres, children's centres, faith spaces and care homes that will be offering a warm welcome. And I mean that both in terms of human relationships and physical warmth to people to go there during these coldest months. We'll be publishing a plan this week, and that partners across the city, who are looking to support our welcoming spaces, will be able to use to make sure that our efforts in the city are coordinated. In this publication, we'll include the latest information on how to access our community hubs and welcoming spaces that are coordinated through this plan, as well as other actions around communication, advice and advocacy that we'll be looking to do in general, but certainly be looking to offer through the welcoming spaces as well. We really are encouraging groups in the city that want to invite others to share their space to register online, and you can find details about how to do this on our council website, and then following the cost of living link. So we still have a call for volunteers to support this citywide network of welcoming spaces. So I can ask you, if you want to volunteer, visit the Can Do Bristol website. The relevant information and links will be there, and we'd love to link you up with those spaces around the city so we can be supporting Bristol families during what is an incredibly challenging time. And the final thing today, much to his embarrassment, no doubt, would be to say thank you to Mike. It's his last cabinet with us. It's been, and I'll say very personally for me, and I think cabinet members will share it. It's been fantastic having you as chief exec here, and we mean that. I think we set our stall out as an authority when we were recruiting as our senior level to really recruit to values. We said repeatedly that we can find accountants and lawyers, no offence, Tim, anywhere. There's plenty of people with technical ability, right? We can find them anywhere. But what you don't always find are people with technical ability and values, the right values. And so when we went out to recruit, and Mike was one of the first to come through this process, we had a very rigorous process in which we tested worldview and values to come in. And I say you've come in, been on that process of us as an organisation setting out a collection of organisational values with our staff, working in the right way, building strong relationships. And when I think about the relationships we have with our city partners through the city office that you've been so central to, and there's huge respect for you in the city, not just in the council, but across our partners, across health, criminal justice, private sector, voluntary sector. When we think about the work we've done nationally as well, we are a city that is leading nationally beyond our size, the first city outside of the north to take on chair of core cities, chair of the LGA City Regions Board, called on constantly to have a national voice and on some of the key issues, of our time. We're leading internationally, and I was over at. Just think about the role you've taken on with our international team, and having just come back from the United Nations General Assembly and Global Goals Week in New York. Actually, the call on Bristol to contribute to the dilemma we face as a world at the moment is that we are not on course to meet our sustainability targets, and I'm asking us not just what we've done, but what we would say about the way those international forums is working. On all of those fronts is a testimony to the contribution you made to the leadership of the organisation, and we just wish you all the best as you go off to become Chief Exec of Wandsworth and Richmond Borough Councils. And it's just I'd say it's a real pleasure to be able to be a place that was on your journey towards what I know is your dream job, working in London. So just wish you all the best, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Secretary.
Okay, on to agenda item 8, Technology-Enabled Care Project, Tech 2. And Helen, you're bringing this item.
I'm just trying to arrange my screen. And yes, technology-enabled care. From now on, we'll call it tech during this meeting, just to reduce the amount of words we have to use about it. I'm sorry, actually, that Brenda isn't here, because she's raised some very pertinent questions, which are the ones that people raise about additional use of tech in care. And so I'm going to kind of cover some of that, even though she's not here. I think one of the important things is to recognise that particularly people who are coming into needing particularly low levels of care and support, that people use a lot of tech in their lives anyway, don't they? So there's no reason to assume that once they need some support, that we can't use all of the tech advances that there have been to make their lives easier. So that it includes, I've seen a fantastic project. I think Asher, you met the guy who's initiated it when we had the big tent here. Use of an Alexa to reduce isolation for people who are on their own. Use of Alexa in order to remind people about when they've got to take their meds. We've got things like interactive doorbells, which more and more people have anyway, so the use of those for people who want to make sure that they know who it is who's coming to their door, and being in charge themselves of letting people in, rather than necessarily what happens quite often now, which is carers let themselves in, and that isn't always a comfortable thing for people to feel. Fridge alerts, so there's now, these are very simple things that can be installed. So an alert would come either to a care company or to a family member if they realise that the fridge hadn't been opened, so the person hasn't made themselves a cup of tea. All of those things are really, really the kind of low-level support needs, but can be life-changing and can mean certainly that people can stay independent in their own homes for much longer. Medicine dispensers, so if people have got to the stage where they're a bit forgetful, they can't remember whether they've taken their meds or not, these are lockable boxes that only open when it's time to get their tablets or their medicine out. So there's loads of things. That's just painting a picture of that kind of low-level stuff, which you can imagine, because of the tech that's already in all of our lives, isn't a huge advance, but it does go right through to very, very much more sophisticated and advanced innovations, which some authorities have been able to take the benefit of probably more than we have. I think one of the other things that sometimes gets raised with me is, I don't want a robot looking after me, I want a person. And that's understandable. You want the job satisfaction for people who are working in care to be higher, because they're doing the bits of the job that they want to do, which is engaging and communicating with the person that they're giving care to, not doing all the mundane things like checking whether medicines have been taken, So this isn't about robots or tech replacing people. It's about enhancing the role that people play. And I'm sure that there are lots of people out there who we want to tap into increasingly because of the workforce shortages, who haven't thought of tech as part of delivering a care jobs, and yet it very much is. So Brenda's asked a question about the training that's being given, and that is really a very, very key question, because one of the issues, and it's covered in the report, is about making sure that whether it's a social worker, a care worker, whoever is making that initial assessment, that they're aware of the options that could be brought in for that particular person. So the training is really, really important, and to get more of that out there, because it is time consuming, obviously, doing those initial assessments and not just falling back on, you know, the old ways of doing things. So making sure that people right throughout the workforce, so that's not only our own people, but people in Serona, in the NHS as well, are aware of all of those benefits that there are there. And then, I mean, this kind of attaches to one of Brenda's questions, is the one around the savings. And I think we look at it in terms of its savings, but it's a better standard of support for people who need help with supporting them to live independent lives. But it's also that cost avoidance. And as the report shows, there's already, with what we've done, there's £1 million of cost avoidance that we've been able to secure. So I think that it's an excellent report. We want to do more of it. We want to do more of it with our health and care and voluntary sector partners. And you'll have seen in the report that there are a couple of bids in yet, which we haven't heard the results of, but with a lot more funding, we could do a lot more and deliver it a lot more quickly.
Thanks, Helen. As you said, we had a question from Brenda, but unfortunately she's not with us. Can I offer to any other Cabinet members before we hand back to you? Ellie.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for bringing this forward. Obviously, technology-enabled care is going to play quite a significant part in our lives as we move forward, and it's really important to recognise that, because it's not all just about delivering efficiencies, which it clearly will, but it can help people develop a relationship with that digital literacy programme if they've not had much contact with it so far. So that can open so many doors to them in so many ways. But yeah, those automated jobs that free up the capacity in people's roles to go back to the caring part of their role is just so essential. And you know, you hear so many anecdotal reports of people not being able to spend much time caring for people because there's so much they've got to do in that short space of time, and this will allow that capacity to increase so they can have a better relationship with their service users and have more job satisfaction as well. And obviously it also empowers people to live independently at home for longer, and that can only be a good thing. So thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Okay. Again, Helen, thank you. Hard yards in adult social care, one of our biggest areas of challenge, but appreciate your leadership on this. So let me hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
I now turn to the decision, and in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. So agenda item 9, HRA Budget Amendment 22-23. Tom, you're bringing this one.
Thank you. So the essence of this paper is we went through quite an extensive engagement process last year to come up with our 30-year business plan for the housing revenue account that looked at how we're going to meet our responsibilities for investment within our existing council housing stock, but also what were the opportunities, including building more council homes, and also setting out a number of initiatives which included launching a bathroom replacement programme and setting aside £80 million to invest in retrofit. Following that work, we had reserves that are £3.8 million higher at the end of last financial year, so we had an underspend. And therefore what we want to make sure we're doing is investing that money back in to meeting our tenants' needs. And so this will cover kind of broadly 3 areas. One is around fire safety, one is around launching a playground renewal programme, and then the other is making sure we're absorbing energy costs and not passing those on to our tenants. And I just wanted to kind of touch on the fire safety to explain a bit more about what we are going to be doing. Fire safety, is a hugely important area for Bristol City Council, and we've invested over £2.5 million a year in fire safety measures across our council properties. And also, while we've been doing that, we've been regularly ensuring that we're reviewing how our buildings are operating, ensuring that the fire safety measures are up to date, and working very closely with the Avon and Somerset Fire Service as well. The recent tragic case of a flat fire at Tunnel House is a sobering reminder that incidents can happen, and ensuring that we have secure fire safety measures in place is really important to protect the whole buildings and prioritise the safety of the residents in the event of emergency. And as you referenced earlier, the measures worked; they kept the fire contained. We have 62 high-rise blocks comprising 4,400 domestic flats. And so what we want to do is there have been some new regulations that have come out this year following the Grenfell inquiry, and we're going to be inspecting all of those blocks under this new regulation under what's called PAS 9980 2022. We've already started a pilot phase of this work to complete 4 assessments, and we've obviously look at risk in terms of the blocks, because the government have released a tool for you to be able to prioritise different blocks. And this will require us to invest almost £1 million in getting these fire safety assessments done. We will, of course, ensure that we remain committed to ensuring that, one, that our residents are safe, but also that we're really proactive and transparent about the work. So once these reports are done, they will be shared with residents, and we'll be really clear about the plan of action if there are any issues emerging from those reports, to address any issues that may be identified. And then lastly, just touching on play areas, we've got many play and multi-use games areas on our kind of HRA land, usually attached to higher low-rise blocks. They provide valuable outdoor and amenity space for children in homes that don't have any private outdoor space. So it is really important we're keeping this space in good nick and making sure we're investing in it. So we've identified several well-used HRA play and multi-use games areas that are approaching the end of life. So we want to make sure that we're investing to replace these and do that through an approach that will be co-designed with local residents as part of the process. So I recommend this report to Cabinet.
Thanks, Tom. And it was a kind of an easy line to use at the end, but that co-design and local ownership is so important to the longevity of those venues. One is that they are most appropriate, but two is they get looked after when they're locally led. And that's a a truth that we've learned in Bristol over the years, isn't it? I think also, I would just say on the fire safety, what we have seen is there was a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, and then unfortunately misinformation amplified during the course of last week. But certainly from our conversation with residents, one of the important things we take away is that people need to know what those fire measures are, and they need to know the checks are taking place. So that commitment to transparency and to include people in those processes, I think, has to be anchored into the way we work. Some people knew, but a lot of people didn't, hence some of the confusion, and then, unfortunately, some of the commentary compounding confusion and fear when it didn't need to. But I really appreciate that work. So we did have a couple of questions, but we haven't obviously no one in attendance. Any other Cabinet members like to comment on this? Don.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to emphasise Tom's final point about play areas, really. In my ward, Lawrence Weston, for instance, traditionally the HRA, although it's a ring-fenced account, it did actually take care of more than just the homes. It took care of the environment, including play areas and parks and stuff around them. And in some areas like Lawrence Weston, the play areas for the whole area are still on HRA land. And obviously the average resident is not aware of what's HRA and what's parks land and why it's difficult to recreate, ROSPA come and take something away, because quite rightly it should have been taken away. You then have a job to bring together who owns the land within the internal discussion and everything. So I really welcome Housing Revenue Account and Estates taking up the responsibility of doing some work to replace some of this. And I think it'll be, some of our most vulnerable citizens, poorest citizens, actually, who will be benefiting from this. So, great. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Don. Kai?
I'll just come in. Well, welcome this this paper, budget amendment. I think you've picked 3 really important areas. See, the fire safety is vital. I'll probably be knocking on your door for some of that money for the parks as well for my ward, but also you've recognised the pressure in terms of the energy prices as well, and a number of the tenants will be on communal systems in blocks. So I think that's a really key area to recognise that additional money is going to be needed to protect. Although we've got the cap, and that might not be enough. So I think it's great that you've recognised that, but also the long-term commitment from the HRA, £90 million in energy efficiency investments. So I look forward to getting some of those projects off the ground in the next year or so.
Thanks, Kai. Thanks, everyone. Oh, Ellie.
I just want to give a big shout out to Tom as well for his work on the playgrounds. I've seen his passion for it, and he's been very laser focused in making sure that gets off the ground and that work's going to get completed. So it's really great to see this coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of want to see Tom's passion for playgrounds tested. So when we do put up the new climbing frames, I want to see some action. Just to, I think if I put you in a competition with Kai over the playground obstacle course. Oh, Nicola. All right. Oh, well, I've offended people now, again. All right, group competition. There we go. All right, so the line's in the sand there, Tom. But let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. So we're staying with you for item 10, the flexible level supported homelessness accommodation service, temporary accommodation service paper.
So this paper describes one of a suite of initiatives that were either under consideration or that we've been working on to try and reduce the council's temporary accommodation overspend. Temporary accommodation remains a hugely challenging issue for us, and we have almost 1,200 households in temporary accommodation at the moment, which isn't good for those individuals or those families, and also creates financial pressure on the general fund. Just to give you some other statistics, the number of placements in temporary accommodation is now more than 40% higher than pre-pandemic. And we've also got those wider pressures of our own social housing waiting list, where we've got almost 19,000 households now on there as well, and that continues to grow each week as we assess applications that are coming in. So it's mean we've had to think a bit more innovatively about what we can do to try and, one, get some of those cost pressures under control, but also then making sure that people are being supported when they are in temporary accommodation in this city. And so one of the models that we've looked at is this flexible level supported homelessness accommodation service. We currently procure 295 temporary accommodation units on a spot purchase framework of private landlords and registered providers for single clients. Although this accommodation is provided to homeless clients, it's without any type of support service. And one of the big things that I should also just flag is this issue of kind of housing benefit subsidy loss. If the way we try and do it at the moment means that we're losing millions every year at the moment through this housing benefit subsidy loss, which creates a real challenge. And it's a subsidy regime that really is in need of updating. And I'd encourage the central government to really think about the pressures councils are facing around their temporary accommodation use across the country. What this new framework will do is enable partner registered providers to deliver creative and innovative solutions for single homeless clients who are being placed in non-supported temporary accommodation through a commission support service that we will commission. And what that allows us to do is have a full cost recovery model, which will then allow access to open market properties. What we will do, though, is ensure that there's a bespoke framework agreement in place to fully mitigate the risks and prohibit the exploitation of the housing benefit scheme. We would not commission any services that do not meet specific criteria regarding the rent and service charges, accommodation standards, and the provision of quality housing-related support, as we do not want to end up in the situation that some other cities in the UK have found themselves in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. We did have a couple of questions But as you see, people not with us. I think Tony's on his way, Tony Dyer, but Tony's not with us as yet. So we'll get those answers out to people. Can I just ask any other cabinet members if they had anything to contribute here? No, I mean, I'll just say, just in terms of our, which is around this really, when we look at what's been happening with what's passing as a government over recent weeks, the challenges facing us as local government are only going to get worse, not just in the worsening status of our population, standing of our population, but the real concern for us is that there are going to be two easy targets, or what they see as easy and lazy targets for government to go after as they look to, cover say where they're going to make the savings to make to cover their policy backs, and that is benefits and local government. They won't touch the NHS, they won't touch defence, but I think they're going to come after us. So just as our populations take a hit, our ability to support our populations will also take a hit. I mean, it's just it just beggars belief as to where we are at the moment. And I think we see increasing numbers of local, they're getting angry about what's going on with us. So we need something different to happen at the top tables, don't we? But nonetheless, thank you for the work you've done on this. Let me hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support and which will be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
I just had an article in front of me. It looks like even Priti Patel is criticising, which is something. All right. Agenda item 11, parking tariff review 22-23, controlled parking zone, city centre and off-street parking, off-street car parks. Don, you're bringing this item.
Thanks, Marvin. Excuse me. This report recommends an increase in parking tariffs in the central controlled parking zone and our off-street car parks. This is often a high-profile issue, but we do regularly update the fees, although in fact it's 2020, the end of 2020, since we last updated these fees. The increase this year reflects the inflationary costs that impact on the provision of the parking, because it's got to be maintained, but also our enforcement function, which is something I'm spending a lot of time on at the moment, and I want to develop further. As well as this, and we make increases based on our transport policy. That's the reason legally why we do it. And our policy is that we do want driving not to be a cheap way of coming into the city. We want to encourage people to use other modes. So bus fares have gone up, and we want to make our park and rides more competitive. And also we are working on more bus prioritisation and more active travel measures as well. So we want to see that shift. So there is a policy base to this. There is also a policy approach that we want to encourage shopping and other leisure activities by offering short stay parking. And some of the district car parks which we've got around the place are really important for local high streets. So they are important to help to encourage the local economy out in other areas. I particularly want to give a call out for Wapping Wharf at the moment. We continue to look at their situation and continue to encourage people to support businesses on Wapping Wharf while our highways activities are going on down there. I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. We had a question from Councillor Edwards, but obviously we've no attendance today. So can I ask any cabinet members if they had anything to contribute here? No, thank you. Oh, I mean, parking tariffs is a fantastic baton to be carrying for you. I'm sure you're enjoying that one. But again, thank you for your work on that. So let me hand back to you to take the decision, which I support, and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thank you. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Okay, on to agenda item 12, refreshing permission to construct the A4018 scheme following a change in funding source. That's with you as well, Don.
Thank you. This item is quite a technical paper to delegate approval to procure the necessary contracts for the A4018 Passage Road scheme construction and note a change in the funding source. The project is about improvements in the northern end of the A4018 Passage Road in Henbury, with bus lanes, segregated cycle lane and new pedestrian crossings. The scope and objectives of the scheme have not changed since the June 2019 decision, I think, which Kai would remember, but things have been delayed by COVID. Because of inflation, there is an estimated increase of 1.25 million from the original cost and 698,000 from the funding approved. Therefore, we're bringing this paper to Cabinet to update the delegations to reflect this, so we can move forward, procure the work and deliver the project. Just like to note, in the response to Councillor Wilcox's questions on this item, there has been an inconsistency in how the financing of the project is described in the report. And for clarity, WECA are providing all the necessary funding. So there's 4.38 million from CRSTS and 0.7 million from Transforming Cities Fund, which is a decision of WECA how they, which funding sources they use. And the comments in the report from our finance business partner have been made on this basis. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. We've had two statements. Neither statementee, is that the word? Stater is here, so we'll take those on the record. Let's go to our questions. Two questions from Councillor David Wilcox. Would you like to ask your first question?
Thank you, Maurice, and thank you, Councillor Alexander, for your clarification. So you're going to be spending all the TCS funding before March 2023 then?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm taking it there was no supplementary from that. Am I correct?
That's very correct, Maurice.
Okay. Did you have a second question?
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So any other Cabinet members like to comment on this item? Okay, Don, let me hand back to you to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. My greetings to Dave Redgewell as well. I think he's quite unwell, actually. And a couple of the statements were from him. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So on to agenda item 13, Temple Quarter grant funding arrangements, and I'm going to introduce this report. Temple Quarter work has been going on for a long time. The first strategic board was September 2017, and it's the result of a strong partnership and shows what public sector partners can do when we work together. We know there's been a lot of interest over the years. Now the project has £95 million from government, which we announced in June. There's real momentum behind it. So the paper today recommends that we enter into a formal collaboration agreement with the three Temple Quarter partners. That's Homes England, Network Rail, and the West of England Combined Authority. Now, obviously, we've already been working together for some time. So this agreement will formalise the relationship for the next phase as each partner takes on responsibility for different elements of delivery, working collectively towards the transformation of 130 hectares of central Bristol. The new agreements will be put in place, which will enable the Council and Network Rail to receive and spend the funding given to the project by government working through WECA in June. So with this funding, we can start delivering the works we've been talking about. 3 new station entrances, around 2,500 new homes, 2,000 jobs, and the infrastructure to support them, as well as laying the foundations for the longer term elements of the project. So there's already lots happening. Silverthorne Lane, Temple Island, Mead Street. We can expect more to happen as we swing into action fully in the coming months and years. So this paper sets out more detail on the project plans for the next 6 months, for the next months and years, and the enabling works also. It's not just about Bristol. The project will give the region the gateway it needs and deserves, and bring a huge annual boost to the city region and to the wider Western Gateway area. So we know there's a lot of interest in Temple Quarter across the city and region, and we've committed to hearing citizens' views on proposals. This is a very long-term project, and we're developing a comprehensive program of public engagement, working with community development colleagues so that we can engage local people, community groups and businesses through the life of the project. And we recognise that this is going to be absolutely critical to ensuring that this regeneration opportunity is an exemplar of inclusive economic development with the local multiplier, local jobs benefiting local businesses and local people's housing needs. So we're also offering walking tours of the key sites being delivered with this funding to help people see the scale and scope of the project firsthand. So if anyone's interested, they can just email templequarter@bristol.gov.uk to find out more and take part. So we received 2 statements. Neither statementee is in the building at the moment. We did have a question. Again, the question is not with us at the moment. Can I offer this up to any cabinet members in light of that? So, Asha and then Nicola.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. I just wanted, firstly, this is really great news. You know, I know planning and all of this kind of regeneration takes a really long period of time. But I'm really excited about what's to come. And I just wanted to remind Cabinet members about earlier this year when I helped to launch the new Building Bristol Partnership, which is a scheme designed to transform the way we integrate employment and training within all of our major developments, and that includes Temple Quarter development. So, you know, I wanted to kind of ensure, and that's working with our employment and skills team and the planning team, and developers are putting in an extra resource to enable us to work with them so that they can access employment opportunities for local people, local residents in and around the area. So I wanted to kind of remind you of that, welcome that this is moving forward, and also, again, maybe to just highlight in the because in the report it talks about the benefits to the wider city and the local area. So, like you said, you know, 2,500 homes will hopefully develop a much more inclusive economy, and really upskill many people who live very local to that area. So, yeah, it's exciting. Can't wait to see it happen, including the station. That's been a long time coming.
Big one. Nicola.
Thanks, Marvin. It won't be a surprise that I welcome this as well. Having sat through those strategic board meetings, it's interesting to think that Alex went there as an infant and is about to start school in September. I was just going to comment on government, actually, in terms of, you know, planning reform has been on and off the cards over the last 4 years pretty routinely. And a big part of those reforms was around, you know, a zonal approach to planning. In lieu of really any government certainty around that, I think this is the absolute logical step in terms of being purposeful about going beyond what planning would expect to capture those the other co-benefits that Asha and yourself have talked about. The current planning system will not achieve that, and the only way to achieve that is to do it ourselves, basically. And I think that's why it is the main driver for me, as well as actually delivering this, actually doing it. You know, by building this kind of system around Temple Quarter, it will happen. And I think with the challenges that we face nationally and internationally and all the, you know, barriers to regeneration at the moment, this is the way to do it. And I don't think there is another credible alternative. And so I really welcome this. And I think it gives surety to the city about the intent and the absolute drive to actually regenerate this part of the city. And for the people that work in those areas around Temple Meads, it also gives them a single point of contact. And I think that's really, really important when change is happening. There's a consistency and accountability and a place to go to speak. So if you're a community or a business, this will enable you to do that. And I think that's equally important. Thanks, Marvin.
Thanks, Nicola. Tom?
I think just to share my support for this as well, it's really good. I know sort of, although only being on Cabinet and Accounts since last year, how many years of work have gone into getting things to this point. So it's really good to see where we now are. And, you know, I think that the broader opportunity as well that this unlocks, you know, 10,000 homes, 22,000 new jobs being created, an opportunity for us to really think about inclusive economic growth as well, and ensuring actually everyone is sharing in the prosperity of the city. And I just think there's so many opportunities that will come from this, and also to build on, you know, the fantastic work that's being done around sort of delivery on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well, to make sure we're focused on low carbon, climate friendly homes, jobs and opportunities at the heart of the city. It's brilliant.
Don?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously good news for planning as well, for transport as well, because at the moment we've got no kind of transport interchange down there, so a lot of the buses kind of head off that way, and people are always writing to me and asking why their bus doesn't go via the station. And the cycle park, yes, all right, but don't do it again. And the cycle parking is really poor as well. And yeah, this is the money at last to get that going. So I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you all. I mean, it's one of the most significant regen opportunities in Europe, as has been described to us. And as you said, Nicola, I remember Alex being in those meetings right at the beginning. It's been a long journey, lots of work. We've pursued government relentlessly as a partnership of local organisations, pursuing that promise. I think different parts of government have pursued different parts of government. But now to enter into this, you know, agreement again, you know, is another step on really driving that delivery forward. So it's incredibly welcome. So thank you all. I'm now going to take this decision. And in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. We're on to 14 now, which is yourself, Nicola, and this is Bristol Avon Flood Strategy.
Thanks, Marvin. People might remember that at this year's budget, we talked about how important it was this year for the River Avon flood risk strategy and why safeguarding the reserve budget was absolutely critical to the activity we had planned. So today's paper sort of brings that to life really and sets out why, with our partners, such as the Environment Agency and WECA, we're working together to reach the funding envelope needed to protect Bristol from rising sea levels and future flood events. There's quite a bundle in the pack, and so it is worth a read. There's a lot of information in there, and it follows the strategic outline case that we set out in March 2021. This year has been a critical year. We meant that when we spoke up in the budget about protecting those reserves. It was absolutely essential that we reached a shared and common understanding with all the key stakeholders that play into how we protect the city in future from floods. In the paper, as you'll see, there is an MOU between ourselves and the Environment Agency. There's a collaboration agreement with the Environment Agency about how we go from an outline sort of planning case into a full business case, which looks at how we actually protect the city and the detailed design of those flood defences. There's a planning policy statement which gives that extra guidance that is needed to all stakeholders, be you a private developer, community or a business, about the current position and how important it is to integrate development into future flood defences and achieve those combined goals, if people remember from our initial business case, about a safe city with active travel, new walkways, which work every day for the city and not just when the flood happens. And there's also an interim funding statement. So I just wanted to talk about the finances for a moment. The current financial position is as follows. The Phase 1 spend, which will be done in the next 10 years, is £216 million. The current amount of money we have between flood defence grant and aid is 69 million. From the Economic Development Fund, a further 10 million. We ourselves are working towards a commitment between reserves and strategic SIL of 30 million, and there is a potential additional WECA funding of £25 million from their grants. That is subject to further discussions on potential business cases, and I'm really hopeful that WECA can support that. With all those funding sources together, that still leaves a gap of 81 million. And I guess that I'm raising that to say, you know, we've come a long way, but there is a long way still to go. And this is proper long-term business planning and resilience for the city. We'll continue to work on that as we progress. I'm absolutely confident we will get there, but I just think I wanted to raise and talk through that because I think it really demonstrates while we're challenging ourselves about our day-to-day budget and keeping, you know, getting the council through the budget this year and next year. Meanwhile, we have these humongous threats to our city that we must protect ourselves from. And so it's a call out to anyone that will listen and government to say, you know, we will continue to grow our city and we will continue to meet our challenges, but this also needs to be funded. I'll pause there for any questions. Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you, Nicola. We did have a question, but Councillor Pearce isn't here, and I think we had another question from Marley, but Marley won't be here, so we can send them the answers separately. There were no other questions. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Kai.
Cheers, thank you. Yeah, just to welcome this paper and report. I think it's vitally important that we start to make progress on this because the risk is going up because of climate change. And I think in the report it says if we actually did nothing, the number of properties that would be affected by the risk of flooding would almost double, more than double, sorry, by the end of the century. And that's the pressure that climate change is having on the risk. But alongside that, there's also lots of co-benefits from building flood defences as well. That I think are quite important. See the housing that you can potentially get out of it, but also the spaces for nature, alongside the new defences, and also the opportunities for cycle routes as well, alongside the flood defences. Just also wanted to mention alongside this, obviously, a big impact of climate change is going to be the flooding risk, but also the risk from heat as well and hotter summers. Just to reassure, obviously Cabinet, many of you will be aware that there is a really important piece of work going on looking at how higher than expected heat is going to impact on, higher than average heat and the number of days that are higher than average are going to massively increase over the next 50 years and how the city responds to that. So that's another important piece of work that sits alongside the flooding strategy in terms of how we make sure the city is resilient going forward in terms of how it deals with climate change. Thanks.
Thank you, Kai, very much. So, yeah, thank you, Nicola, for your leadership on this. So let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you. So on to agenda item 15, procurement of household goods contract in respect to the local crisis and prevention fund and temporary accommodation furnished tenancy scheme. Councillor Cheney's not with us today, so I'm going to ask Tom to introduce this report.
Thank you. So this report seeks permission for a procurement solution for the household goods contract in respect of our vitally important local crisis and prevention fund and our temporary accommodation furnished tenancy scheme. The contract period itself will be for a period of up to 5 years, replacing the current contract that's due to expire in March. The local crisis prevention fund supports around 2,400 low-income households every year with emergency support and household goods. And you can read the sort of full paper to see the details about the amounts and the range of things that we do supply to them. The fund also supports assistance to around 60 homeless households in TA via a resettlement support package, which furnishes their properties when moving on to more stable accommodation. Also, I think just one of the things that I want to note the benefits of around recycling, repair and reuse with this, and ensuring the sharing of goods as well as improving the efficiency that will make sure that new contract does continue with those principles. There's a lot of talk about crisis and emergencies at the moment. There's a cost of living crisis. I think we're in a housing crisis. We're in a rent crisis. There's so much going on and that it's getting worse and not really helped by a lack of coherent government strategy around it all. But with this work, this is what allows us to support families when their budgets are devastated in moments of crisis. And, we know how important these interventions are, which is why I'm so pleased we've been able to protect this funding through very challenging budget environment and stopping some families from tipping over into poverty or worse poverty. So, really grateful to be able to introduce this report on behalf of Councillor Cheney today.
Thank you very much, Tom. We've had nothing on this, no questions or statements from any councillors. Any cabinet members like to comment? Ellie?
Yeah, the local crisis prevention fund really shows our values. I'm really proud of it and what we continue to fund in times of really extreme financial pressure. And this will just hold the most vulnerable in our society from falling into rent arrears or worse, and it supports our really vulnerable families and gives them that not just a place to live but a home and the chance to have a really good start in life and to hopefully start the conditions in which they can thrive. So it's really important and I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Nicola?
Just to second that really, and St George Central as a ward, we get a lot of casework in this space, and it really hits home when you're dealing with those individual families across the estate basically that just need that support. And the other thing, it's fast, and that's also absolutely critical. And I think that if you've never been in that situation, the speed in which we can act when we need to, it doesn't get necessarily any thought, but when it's needed, it's there at the moment, and I think that's absolutely critical. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think we can anticipate that the level of crises, as you said, we've got crises all over the place, Tom, at the moment. And it is one of the unfortunate realities or challenges of that we face being in local government at this moment in time as to how we navigate our way through with our populations, facing more need, but with ever tighter resource available to us at the local government level, and with it seems a national government that either doesn't have the ability or will to understand just how important local government is to meeting the needs of people on a day-by-day basis, and the role of local government as a convener of place, the convener of that collection of institutions that support our populations, not only to survive, but ultimately to thrive as well in the places we live. So again, I agree, Ellie, this is a real declaration of our values, and our priorities as an administration. So thanks for your work. I am somewhat disappointed that there has been no interaction with this from any councillors, particularly as we're on the cusp of into that new chapter in our cost of living crisis, and we go into the winter periods when this would be so important. But there you go. So Tom, let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. So on to agenda item 16. This is with me. It's the medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. Now, the MTFP and the capital strategy provide the financial context within which revenue and capital budgets for the council will be set. The MTFP is not itself a formal budget, but a rolling 5-year plan which provides a strategic framework to meet corporate priorities, taking a forward-looking approach to the management of our financial resources and how we achieve sustainability in our finances over the medium term. So the budget report to Cabinet in February 2022 outlined a balanced general fund revenue position for all 5 years. But recent economic uncertainty, high inflation, including the pay offer, and the cost of living crisis have all had a detrimental impact on our financial position. As a result, this latest MTFP shows a general fund budget gap, which is set to grow over the 5-year period. Several scenarios have been modelled, and the base forecast indicates a funding gap of £31 million in 23-24 rising to a peak of £37.5 million in 27-28. This is a realistic but uncertain medium case, adjusted to incorporate the emerging pressures, possible available resources, and latest government funding assumptions. But this forecast gap is extremely sensitive to inflation, service pressure, and funding assumptions, so it could range from a best case scenario of 14 million to a worst case scenario of 87.5 million. Consequently, we must respond rapidly to achieve and maintain a balanced position and ensure financial resilience. We must be able to cover any unforeseen expenditure by retaining reserves at 6% of the net revenue budget. We must also leverage external income, maximise locally generated income, and reduce costs. Public health, the housing revenue account, and a dedicated schools grant are all ring-fenced accounts and operate on a principle of self-funding. Accordingly, public health and the HRA plans will need to contain additional costs and any new burden. The dedicated schools grant is currently forecasting a carry-forward deficit of £44.5 million by the end of 22-23. This forecast is in line with the DSG cumulative deficit position outlined in the March 22 budget report, and plans for mitigation are in development. The financial planning assumptions used for this MTFP will be kept under constant review, particularly given the increased level of uncertainty in the financial and the economic climate. The capital strategy is an overarching document which sets the policy framework for the development, management and monitoring of our capital investment. Our capital strategy ensures our investment in capital projects is sound, supports the delivery of our corporate objectives, and focuses on the core principles that underpin the Council's capital programme. And it sets out the approach to the development of the 23-24 to 32-33 capital programme, and sets out the framework for the development of the detailed programme. The capital strategy is integrated with the medium-term financial plan and the Treasury management strategy to ensure a full account is taken of revenue implications and restrictions on capital resources. The proposed changes to the strategy are predominantly to ensure our capital investment remains sustainable, affordable, or minimises the exposure to risks when developing future capital programmes and provide clarity for capital governance. So I think you'll hear from those numbers huge challenges for us, as a local authority, alongside huge challenges for local authorities all across the country at this moment in time. We received one statement on this, but no questions. The statement's from Bristol Disability Equalities Forum. Brendan's not here, so we will have to. That statement will go on record, and I welcome Brenda's statement on that. We've had no questions. Can I ask anyone from Cabinet if they'd like to comment on this? No? Just a huge challenge for us. Well, look, I now take this decision, and in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. The next one is also with me, another finance paper, about which we've had no questions or statements. Agenda item 17, 22-23, Q2 finance report. This finance report for Q2 is a full report on our latest forecast revenue and capital position for 22-23. We are headlining an overspend of £11 million, representing 2.5% of our general fund budget. The challenges are mainly due to the non-delivery of some planned savings and emerging service pressures within adults and children's social care, education, digital transformation, and temporary accommodation. This forecast also includes £8.5 million, which relates to indicative pay awards and additional inflation risk. So like all councils and businesses, we are exposed to the post-pandemic challenges and cost of living crisis, which is why an assessment of the excess spend due to inflation, soaring energy costs and pay awards is included in this. Management mitigations and further use of reserves are forecast to bring the in-year budget to balance on a one-off basis. However, this does not address the ongoing pressure in future years, which is captured in the medium-term financial plan we just discussed. The dedicated schools grant remains a significant risk, with the in-year deficit forecast as £19.9 million, which would bring the carried forward deficit at the close of 22-23 to £44.5 million. In response to this deficit, we are participating in the DfE's Delivering Better Value in SEND programme and will continue to maintain a deficit management plan and work in conjunction with the Schools Forum and wider stakeholders to develop cost avoidance measures and mitigations while meeting the need of children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. The HRA is forecasting a £2 million, that's a 1.8% full year overspend, which is a deterioration on the 0.6 million since P4 forecast. The capital programme forecast variance at Q2 is a net 81.7 million underspend, of which 33.7 million is underspend on the general fund and 48 million underspend on the HRA. Finally, 2 external funding awards have been made to us. The first is for £0.748 million for round 4 of the Safer Streets grant across 22-23 and 23-24, and will provide 0.381 million of funding to match. And just in case I said that wrong, the first is for 0.748 million for round 4 of the Safer Streets grant across 22-23, 23-24. The second grant is for 0.126 million for the delivery of the Prevent programme. So capital approval is requested to adjust budgets accordingly for both of the grants and for the proposed recovery actions. As I said at the start, we've received no public forum statements or questions on this. Any Cabinet members wish to comment? Just more challenge for us as an authority that we have our teams working on. And I appreciate the work you've all done in your departments with your teams as well to get control of spend and find those savings while protecting the public who need our services as well. Not easy. I'll now take the decision. Oh, okay. I'll now take this decision, and in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Agenda item 18 is also with me, and it's the Quarterly Performance Progress Report, Q1, 22-23. Now, this Q1 performance report is the first performance report to show progress against our current corporate strategy, 22-27, and business plan, 22-23. It is focused on delivery against the business plan themes and priorities, tracking performance metrics, and also now showing progress on the business plan actions, so includes more information than ever before. The detailed appendix is now the 7 reports from the thematic performance clinics, each led by a council director and looking in detail at progress for that theme and planned areas for improvement. Overall, 3 of the 7 themes are judged to be on track, with 4 currently behind schedule. Mainly this is due to only 45% of Q1 performance metrics performing on target, as 85% of business plan actions are on track for where we'd expect them to be at the end of Q1. The thematic performance clinic reports include comments against each metric with data and plans for addressing this. This paper for Cabinet to note and Cabinet colleagues is for Cabinet to note, and Cabinet colleagues will have been briefed on their own portfolio performance and actions. Again, we've received no public forum statements or questions on this report. So, unless any Cabinet members have anything to say, we're going to make note of this report. Oh, Asha?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point. I don't want people to think that our silence, or because we're not responding to particularly the last three papers, means that we are not taking this incredibly seriously. As you stated, and as you said, we are all respectively working with our service area leads and directors on addressing what is a huge challenge, not only for us in the local authority, but right across the country. So I just want the wider public to understand that we have got we're trying to get a grip on all of this, and it's uncomfortable, but as you said, we will do our best to protect the most vulnerable in our city as we tackle this issue.
Thanks, Asha, because that's why I sort of half put my hand up. And I think as we sit here digesting what the last 3 weeks have looked like in this country, I mean, we thought it was bad under Boris Johnson, and you know, it is just been an unbelievable 3 weeks. In the inevitable car crash that is going to follow, you know, it's easy to miss the bit on public services and the passover, I guess, of that onto local government. And it's just an appeal to anyone not to miss that in all the noise about mortgages and rents and food crisis and energy crisis and everything else we're going through, is that slip that will happen where that pressure is pushed yet again. You know, for 12 years we've been living in this environment, and that is about to get charged up again, you know, at a point where we couldn't imagine it getting much harder. And it's just a shout out to this, you know, everyone who talks about this stuff, whether it's online, in person, in groups, just to watch that closely, because we all feel that. We feel it sat here now, and we're going to feel that, we fear, even more so as inflation doesn't get met, and we, you know, and we just work our hardest for our citizens. And so, yeah, that's why I almost came in. So I'm glad, Ashley, you did that, because I think it's easy to miss in the, as I say, the car crash that will inevitably follow at a national level as they try and claw some credibility back. Thanks, Marvin.
Thanks. And unfortunately, I think alongside just that offloading responsibility onto our shoulders without adequate resource, I think there could also be a bit of political gaming as well. Let's try and drag some other elements of governance into the mix and point at cutting the fat from local government as though there's anything left to cut. So I think we'll probably see some of that narrative to try and throw some mud around. We need to protect ourselves against that as much as possible. Asha, you had a final comment?
Yes, I was going to make a final comment, because you're right about the political point scoring, because as I said, the challenges are really huge, really great for us. And you highlighted earlier on about the challenge we face within the DSG budget. And my concern is that also the government is playing games with the city, because I've seen other councils not too far from us who have less pressure than us in within that budget being given a financial helping hand, and they've ignored Bristol, that has obviously the highest level of need. So, you know, obviously we need to put more pressure on government to support us. Yes, we are working with them through the whole improvement process, but you know, we need financial help, and so they seem to be quick to give funding to Tory-led, they're Tory-led councils as opposed to others. So, yeah, lots of political game playing going on.
I will share actually. This was one of the lines of conversation that was had up at conference last week when we were talking about levelling up, wherever that stands with national government at the moment. In that, as we look at whatever, as we try to make sure that levelling up actually means something that of genuinely tackling inequality, and actually is protected from being politically co-opted to direct money to particular Labour Conservative constituencies for political ends, that levelling up has to be evidence-based, right? Proper data. Where is the need? Where is the opportunity? Where should we put money first to get the maximum leverage, not just for that particular place, but how it echoes out into the wider economy. The sad reality is at the moment that decisions don't seem to be evidence-based, and we've seen that to the nth degree recently with the fiscal event that's resulted in our so contributed to so much of our economic turmoil at the moment. But the ability to make decisions based on political calculation rather than actual evidenced need and evidenced opportunity is potentially one of the biggest threats that we face at this moment in time when things are so precariously balanced in this country and in the world. So we need better, basically. So this report is for noting, and so it is noted. On to our final paper, agenda item 19, which is the Corporate Risk Management Report, Quarter 2, 2022-23. I've got this one as well. It's also for noting. This report provides a summary on the current significant strategic risks to the Council achieving its strategic aims and objectives for Quarter 2. 2 critical risks remain unchanged from the previous quarter, which relate to increased costs, restrictions and uncertainty of future sufficient insurance cover for higher risk properties and the cost of living crisis impact on citizens and communities. In addition, the risk of adult and social care major provider supplier failure has deteriorated from a high risk to a critical risk in Q2. So the report also summarises the progress and actions taken in managing and reducing these risks to tolerable levels, and future details are provided within the report. Again, no public forum and statements of questions. I'm offering it to Cabinet, but I think we've kind of outlined our concerns of some of the risks and our concerns about the context, the political and economic context within which we as an authority are facing these risks. So if I can carry those forward, that allows me to note this report and say, then that's the end of today's Cabinet meeting. Thank you for those that attended. I will just say, as I say before, this was potentially the most poorly attended Cabinet I have chaired since being elected as Mayor, from councillors. And if we are serious about the committee system, it's really important that councillors begin attending these meetings because they need to familiarise themselves with decision-making processes in the council and what's actually going on. And the committee system will require attendance at Cabinet meetings beyond the level of attendance that councillors currently put in. So it's very important to the handover that's going to happen between the mayoral system and the committee system that the game is upped, basically, in attendance. This today was really not good enough. It's not summer holidays. It's not half terms. This is school time. So we can be here. All right. Date of the next Cabinet meeting is Tuesday, the 1st of November, 2022. I'll see you and hopefully see a few more people there. Take care.